When you hear the name Helen Keller, what comes to mind? A young girl, blind and deaf, learning to communicate at a water pump, a symbol of resilience, a testament to the human spirit's power to overcome incredible adversity. It's a powerful story, one we've all learned since childhood, but that's only half the story. The popular image of Helen Keller often freezes her in time, forever that young girl at the well. But the real Helen Keller grew up. She became a brilliant, articulate, and fiercely radical woman who challenged the very foundations of the society that celebrated her. And one of her most passionate, and perhaps most forgotten, crusades was her powerful stance against war. Today, we're going to uncover the story of Helen Keller, the anti-war hero. It's a side of her you probably never learned about in school, a narrative that was deliberately softened and erased over time because it made powerful people uncomfortable. So, how did the beloved symbol of inspiration become a vocal opponent of government policy and a thorn in the side of the establishment? The journey begins with her education. Helen graduated with honors from Radcliffe College in 1904. It was there, with her teacher Anne Sullivan by her side, that she devoured books on history, economics, and philosophy. She wasn't just learning facts. She was learning to analyze the world around her, to connect the dots between power, poverty, and politics. She quickly realized that the challenges faced by people with disabilities were not just medical issues, but social and economic ones. She saw how poverty and lack of opportunity created a cycle of disadvantage. This understanding opened her eyes to broader injustices. She became a socialist, a suffragist, and a staunch advocate for workers' rights. She saw all these struggles as interconnected, parts of the same fight for a more just and equitable world. For Helen, helping one group meant helping all. So when the drums of war began beating across Europe in 1914, leading up to World War I, Helen Keller was not swept up in the patriotic fervor. She saw something else entirely. She saw a tragic and pointless conflict fueled not by noble ideals, but by greed and imperial ambition. While newspapers and politicians were calling for American intervention, Helen was raising her voice in opposition. On January 5, 1916, she delivered a powerful speech at Carnegie Hall in New York City. The speech was titled, "Strike Against War," and it was explosive. She didn't hold back. Imagine the scene: a packed hall, expecting to hear an inspirational story, is instead confronted with a fiery political indictment. She began by directly addressing the workers in the audience. "She told Tim, the clever ones, up in the high places know how childish and silly the workers are. They know that if the government dresses them up in a khaki uniform and gives them a rifle and starts them off with a brass band and waving banners, they will go forth to fight valiantly for their own enemies." What a powerful statement. She was arguing that patriotism was being used as a tool to manipulate the working class. She believed that the workers of Germany, France, England, and America had no real quarrel with each other. Their true enemies, she argued, were the industrialists and financiers who profited from war. She explained her reasoning with stunning clarity. She asked the audience, "Who builds the battleships and the submarines? Who makes the rifles and the cannons? The workers. And who fights in them? The workers. And who suffers the most? The workers, their families, their communities. The rich," she pointed out, "declare the wars, but it's the poor who have to fight and die in them." She laid out the economic incentives for war, explaining that it was a business. The loud little handful, she called them, who are advocating preparedness, are the very ones who are going to profit from it. The big trusts and banks, the manufacturers of munitions and war machines. She saw the call for military preparedness not as a defensive measure, but as a deliberate step toward a conflict that would line the pockets of a select few. This was a radical and dangerous message at a time of rising nationalism. Many people who had once admired her were shocked. Newspapers that had praised her as a miracle and an angel now turned on her. They questioned her intelligence and her sources of information. Some even sank to the cruel and absurd claim that she could unpossibly have these complex thoughts herself, given her disabilities. They suggested she was being manipulated by her radical friends. Helen's response to this was brilliant and scathing. She wrote, "At other times the compliments I've received are so generous that I blush. But when I speak on a subject that is near to the hearts of the masses, like industrial democracy, I am an idiot. It is a lucky thing for me that I am deaf and blind, for if I could see and hear, I would surely be sent to prison for my views. She turned their prejudice back on them, exposing their hypocrisy. They celebrated her when she was a quiet, inspirational figure. But the moment she used her voice to challenge their power, they tried to silence her by weaponizing her disability. But she refused to be silenced. Throughout the war, she continued to write and speak out. She supported conscientious objectors, men who refused to fight on moral grounds. And she campaigned for a more peaceful and just world order. She saw the war as a catastrophic failure of humanity, a betrayal of the working people of all nations. Her anti-war stance was deeply connected to her broader worldview. As a socialist, she believed that capitalism, with its relentless pursuit of profit and competition for resources, inevitably led to conflict and imperialism. War, to her, was the ultimate expression of a system that valued profit over people. She dreamed of a world where workers were not pitted against each other, but united in a common cause for dignity, equality, and peace. So why is this part of her story so often forgotten? Because Helen Keller the radical is a much more challenging figure than Helen Keller the saint. The story of her overcoming her disabilities is inspiring, but it's safe. It doesn't ask us to question our own society. But Helen Keller, the anti-war activist, the socialist, the critic of capitalism, that woman forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about power, inequality, and the real cost of war. It is easier for history to remember the miracle at the water pump than the firebrand at the anti-war rally. But by remembering only one part of her story, we do a disservice to her incredible legacy. We strip her of her intellect, her political courage, and her profound commitment to justice for all. The real Helen Keller was not just a symbol of personal triumph. She was a fighter. She used the platform her fame gave her, not just for herself, but to advocate for the voiceless, the exploited, and the forgotten. Her stance against World War I is a powerful reminder that true courage isn't just about overcoming personal obstacles. It's about standing up for what is right, even when it's unpopular, even when the world that once celebrated you turns against you. Her words from that 1916 speech still resonate today. Be not dumb, obedient slaves in an army of destruction. Be heroes in an army of construction. It has a call to action that is just as relevant now as it was over a century ago. Let's remember the whole story of Helen Keller, the story of a true hero who fought not just her own battles, but the battles of all humanity. Thank you for watching. If you found this hidden history as fascinating as I do, please hit that like button, subscribe for more stories that challenge the narrative, and share this video to help us remember the real Helen Keller. See you next time.